Welcome back to another DPS analytic video. This is going to be the third week for Phase 5 of Blackwing Lair. Looking at all percentiles, we can see some of these classes are breaking away from that median DPS. The Moloch is well ahead of everyone else in comparison to the median DPS. Even your Balance Druid is starting to edge out away from that median threshold. Everything else is very close within each other, similar to what we saw last week. And then every time we talk about this, we say this every week, the Ellie Shaman is that one exception to where it is not close to the median DPS. Moving on to max percentile, we're going to see a huge drop off from the Enhance. They were all the way up here at the top 5 spot last week, and now they've moved down a significant amount. The Ret Paladin has lost their place to the Demo Lock this week, and then the Assassination Rogue in combat have replaced where the Fire Mage was. And let's not forget about the Balance Druid. They have moved up a spot from where this Destruction Warlock is, and that's a pretty hefty amount of points. Moving on to 95 percentile, your Demo Lock is on top, and we're seeing a similar story here compared to max percentile. So the first thing I noticed is the Arcane Mage was top 3 for 95 percentile last week. Now they're all the way down here in the middle DPS. Red has moved up a couple spots, Balance has moved up a couple spots, Enhance has moved down again, trending to how the max percentile is, and then the Ellie is still well behind everything else. Moving on to individual fights, we'll see a totally different story here. Arcane Mage, Feral Druid, and Fury Warrior, as well as the Ret Paladin, the top DPS for this 95 percentile. But in terms of max percentile, we will see the same for classes as usual. The Feral Druid, the Ret Paladin, and the Fire Mage, as well as the one and only the Fury Warrior, of course. And I'm really surprised to see that an Ellie Shaman is doing so well in this fight. It makes sense that this fight has such a short burst window and the Ellie Shaman can really capitalize on that, but I never thought I would see them in the top 5 spot for this encounter. Moving on to Veil, a fight where there's only a couple classes that take a ton of benefit from that Burning Adrenaline, and it's the same thing as last week. Your Enhance has moved up a little bit, but still a little bit behind where the Ret Paladin and everything else is falling. Looking at 95 percentile, we'll see that the Arcane Mage has creeped up a couple spots, and same for the Frost Mage. But again, if they aren't to normalize the damage for Burning Adrenaline, we're likely to see the same thing trending forward. Moving on to Broodlord, everything is very close within each other for this encounter. The Demo Lock is the only thing really beating out everyone else, only by 200, around 100 to 200 DPS. Moving on to max percentile, we have the Feral Druid, Ret Paladin, and then the Shadow Priest going down a couple spots. Balance Druid popping off, and Melee Hunter still doing incredibly well for this encounter. Moving on to Firemaw, we still have the Fury Warrior on top because of that Rage generation. Just taking extra damage lets them do more damage. So, of course, any encounter like that, Veil Straws is another example. They're just going to excel at those encounters. Feral Druid, incredibly versatile on this fight since they have a heavy front load of bursty cooldowns. Your Ret Paladin still very competitive for that top 5 spot, followed by the Assassination Rogue, the Fire Mage, and then the Demo Lock. Going to 95 percentile, a little bit more stagnant. You're not seeing a huge gap from the Feral Druid and the Fury Warrior. Everything else is a little bit closer now, but you can see what classes are really underperforming on this fight compared to most of the melee DPS, outside of the Demo Lock being the only caster really popping off here. For the Ebon Rock and Flame Gore fight, we finally have the Demo Lock beating the Fury Warrior on the 95 percentile. If you go to max percentile, I'd assume that the Fury Warrior is still on top, and they're on top by a couple hundred DPS, so I would assume that this stays the same, but who knows? If they're beating them already at the 95 and 99 percentile, it's likely to happen in the weeks to come that maybe they beat them for one of the weeks. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Combat Rogue not too far behind that, and then the Affliction Lock trailing behind in 4th place. Feral Druid, Balance, and Ret Paladin also very close within each other there. And if we look at max percentile, a little bit different of a story in comparison. The Ret is way further down. Moving on to Chromag, your Fire Mage just completely untouchable on this fight, it seems. Going to 95 percentile, Arcane Mage and Frost have moved up a little bit. Shadow Priest has moved up a couple spots as well. Balance is kind of still in a similar spot. If we look at max percentile, they have moved up a little bit, not too far behind where the Frost Mage is, and the Fury Warrior right behind a class that benefits so greatly from these spell vulnerabilities. Really surprising to see them that far up here as well. If we look at 95 percentile, you'll see that the Feral Druid is doing exceptionally well as another class that doesn't really benefit from those spell vulnerabilities. And then finally, moving on to Nefarian, the add damage has now been removed from the log, so keep that in mind while we look at this data. Everything is very close within each other. I say that, but obviously there is a gap between the Frost Mage all the way up to the top DPS, being the Demo Lock. If you look at the max percentile, we will see the Fire Mage does scoot up a couple spots, but at the max percentile, we're seeing all of these specs very close within each other. The only real jump is from the Ret to the Demo, around 100 DPS difference here, and then the Marksman Hunter to the Demo, around 200 DPS difference from that first place spot. Pretty insane to see that. Your enhance still slowly falling off from the top of the meters. They were easily the top 5 on overall last week, and on fights like Nefarian just struggling to keep up with everyone else. Ret Paladin looking really good, but if you look at the 95, they have just such a jump down in DPS. Feral Druid not looking so hot on this fight as well, and then the enhance and the mages just struggling on this fight, just like last week. Your range hunters weren't doing so great, but they have moved up a couple spots from last week. And that's pretty much it. There's not too much else to talk about this week. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Comment down below what you'd like to see next. And as always, I will see you in the next one.